He stood frozen in front of the tiny girl with a lollipop in her hand and a messy braid swinging behind her head. Her voice was small, like the squeak of a mouse, but her words hit him like a bolt of lightning. "You look sad, mister," she said, tilting her head with innocent curiosity. "Want to meet my mommy?" Her voice was soft, sweet, full of childlike wonder. But when she pointed toward the food truck behind the park bench and said, "That's her over there," his heart skipped so many beats he thought it might stop altogether. There, laughing gently as she wiped her hands with a napkin, stood her, the woman he had spent the last 6 years trying to forget. The woman he left behind because of a decision he thought was right for both of them. The woman he loved more than anything else in this world. The little girl tugged his sleeve. "Come on." But all he could do was stare, because the girl looked exactly like her mother. And now, suddenly, he wondered, had she looked exactly like him, too? Then the girl said something that turned his legs to jelly. "Mommy said my daddy went away before I was born. She said he had big dreams, but maybe he's still dreaming." His heart slammed against his ribs. Could it be? Before he could speak, the little girl was already skipping toward her mother. He followed, trembling, and when the woman finally turned and saw him, she dropped the cup in her hand. It shattered. Her lips parted. She whispered one word. "You." 6 months earlier, it was raining hard that night, and the city skyline disappeared behind silver sheets of water. Richard Delancey sat alone in the back seat of his black car, parked outside his own skyscraper. The windshield wipers moved in a slow, tired rhythm, but he didn't notice. His eyes were glued to the bright screen of his phone. Yet, he wasn't reading anything. He was staring at the message that wasn't there. No new texts. No missed calls. No one checking in. He sighed. Everyone thought he had it all. The penthouse, the private jet, the billion-dollar company. But tonight, he felt like the loneliest man in the world. His assistant, Connor, tapped on the window. "Sir, do you want me to drive you home?" Richard didn't respond. "Let's just drive anywhere." The car pulled out into the night, and the city rolled by like a silent movie. The rain was relentless, drumming against the windows. After about 20 minutes, he saw something odd. A small park. In this part of the city, parks were rare. "Stop the car," he said. Connor looked confused, but obeyed. Richard stepped out, ignoring the rain, and walked into the park. It was empty, except for a few pigeons and a strange little girl sitting on a swing, holding a red umbrella too big for her tiny frame. She looked up at him, eyes wide and curious. "You look sad, mister," she said. He blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me." She stood and walked up to him, fearless. "Want to meet my mommy?" she asked. He was about to chuckle, thinking it was just a kid being silly, when she pointed. "There she is." Richard turned and followed her tiny finger, and then his world flipped upside down. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Back then, 6 months ago, he had no idea his life was about to change forever. That same morning, in a small downtown bakery filled with the smell of warm cinnamon rolls and fresh bread, a woman named Eliza worked behind the counter. Her apron was dusted with flour, and her smile, though tired, could light up a room. She lived a simple life with her daughter, Maisie. Every morning, Eliza woke up at 5 a.m. to prepare the dough. She packed lunch for Maisie, braided her hair, kissed her on the cheek, and dropped her off at the local daycare. Then she returned to the bakery, where she worked 12 hours a day. She had dreams once, big ones. She wanted to be a chef, open her own restaurant, travel to Paris, and learn from the best. But life had other plans. The night she found out she was pregnant, the man she loved vanished. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence. It broke her heart, but she built a new life, one filled with hard work, honest smiles, and bedtime stories. Meanwhile, Richard sat in his glass tower, going through life like a robot. He was sharp, cold, and ruthless in business. But when the office lights dimmed and he was left alone in his penthouse, the memories came flooding back. He had loved her, deeply, but he had been a coward. When the investors gave him an ultimatum, choose the company or the girl, he made the wrong choice. And now, 6 years later, he wondered if she had moved on, if she hated him, if she ever thought of him. One rainy night, fate answered. He never expected to see her daughter. and he certainly never expected her to look like him. Back in the present, just moments after Eliza dropped the cup and whispered his name, a long silence stretched between them. Maisie looked up at her mother, confused. "Mommy, what's wrong? Do you know the sad man?" Eliza's hands were trembling. She bent slowly, picking up the broken pieces of the cup with shaking fingers. Richard stepped forward. "Eliza," he said, "is she mine?" Maisie tilted her head. "Huh, Eliza," he repeated. "Please." Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't answer. Then she stood up straight, wiped her hands on her apron, and said, "You shouldn't be here. I didn't know," he started, "but you left. Remember?" Maisie looked between them, confused. Richard tried again. "Can we talk? I have nothing to say to you," Eliza replied, turning away. "Go back to your big buildings and boardrooms." Then she took Maisie's hand. "Come on, baby." Richard watched them walk away, but he couldn't move. His legs were stone. His heart was thunder. He knew one thing. He wasn't leaving without answers. That night, he sent Connor to find out everything he could about Eliza's life. He told himself it was just for clarity, for closure. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. Because when he looked at that little girl, he saw something he hadn't seen in years. Hope. The next morning, Eliza found a white envelope slipped under her bakery door. Inside it was a single note. "I'm not leaving. Not this time." There was no signature, but she didn't need one. And just as she turned to lock the bakery for the day, a shadow appeared at the door. It wasn't Richard. It was worse. The man she had hoped never to see again. He smiled, dark and slow. "Hello, Eliza." Her breath caught. "What are you doing here?" And just like that, the past came rushing back, with secrets, lies, and dangers she thought were buried forever. Eliza stepped back, her hand trembling on the doorknob. The man standing outside the bakery wore a slick black coat and a smile that never reached his eyes. His hair was neater than she remembered, but that smug expression, the one that always made her skin crawl, hadn't changed. "Miss me?" he asked casually, as if he were just an old friend stopping by. "No," she said coldly, tightening her grip on the knob. "Go away, Damien." Damien Carr. The name alone was enough to make her heart race for all the wrong reasons. He wasn't just a shadow from her past. He was the mistake she'd barely survived. He chuckled and leaned against the doorframe. "That's no way to treat someone who once saved your business." "You didn't save it," she snapped. "You bought off my debt so you could control me." "That's not how I remember it," he said with a smirk. "You needed help, and I gave it. But that was years ago. I'm not here to argue, Eliza. I'm here because I heard some interesting news." She froze. "What news?" His smile grew sharper. "A certain billionaire was seen talking to your daughter in the park. Her blood ran cold. Stay away from us." Damien leaned in slightly. "You know I don't do threats, Eliza. Just business. And that little reunion? It's bad for business." Before she could slam the door in his face, he slid a piece of paper toward her. "I'll be around. We should talk. I might have an offer you can't refuse." She didn't touch the paper. She just stared at him with fire in her eyes. "Leave, Damien, or I'll call the police." He chuckled again. "Oh, Eliza, you're still the same fighter. But we both know you can't afford another battle." And with that, he walked off into the misty morning, disappearing around the corner like a ghost. Eliza stood frozen for several minutes. Her heart pounded. She hadn't seen Damien in nearly 4 years, ever since she escaped the business arrangement that nearly cost her everything. He was charming at first, generous, but he had a dark side that showed up late, and when it did, things got ugly. She picked up the paper he left behind. It was a contract, and it had the name of her bakery printed across the top. He was trying to buy her out again. Later that day, Richard sat in his office, pacing. His mind was a storm of questions. Was Maisie really his daughter? If so, why hadn't Eliza told him? Did she hate him that much? Was it too late? He hadn't been able to sleep since he saw them. Connor knocked and entered the room. "Sir, I did some digging. You're going to want to see this." He handed Richard a folder. Inside were photos of Eliza at her bakery, Eliza walking Maisie to school, Eliza at the farmer's market. But one photo made Richard's blood go cold. It was Damien, standing outside her bakery. "What's he doing near her?" Richard asked sharply. Connor shrugged. "From what I found, He was involved with her bakery years ago. A loan shark. Shady background. Got chased out of some tech deals a while back, too. He's bad news. Richard's jaw clenched. I want to dig deeper. I want every file, every deal, every threat he's ever made to her. Understood. Richard sat down and stared at the photo of Damien like it was a puzzle he needed to solve before it exploded. That night, Eliza sat at the small kitchen table in their apartment above the bakery. Maisie sat across from her, coloring in a pink unicorn with a broken crayon. "Mommy," she said softly. "Yes, sweetie. Who was that man today? The one in the park?" Eliza looked up, her heart aching. "He was someone I used to know. He looked at me funny," Maisie said, like he was about to cry. Eliza bit her lip. Maybe he was just surprised. "Are you mad at him?" Eliza thought about that. Was she mad? Once maybe, but now she was just afraid. Afraid of what he would do next. Afraid of what it meant if he found out the truth. Afraid of how easily one meeting could tear their peaceful life apart. She reached across the table and stroked Maisie's soft cheek. "Don't worry about him, okay? Mommy's here." Maisie nodded and returned to her coloring. But later that night, after putting her daughter to bed, Eliza sat alone on the couch, staring at the contract Damien had left. She wanted to burn it, tear it up, but something told her this was just the beginning. A storm was coming. She could feel it in her bones. And just when she thought the day couldn't get any worse, she heard a knock at the door. Not the bakery door, the apartment door. She approached slowly, heart racing. Another knock, more urgent. She opened the door, and standing there, drenched from the rain and holding something in his hand, was Richard. "Eliza, please," he said. "I need to talk to you." She tried to shut the door again, but he wedged his foot in the frame. "I'm not here to fight," he said quickly. I just need the truth." She crossed her arms, her voice icy. "Why now?" "Because I didn't know," he said, holding up a photograph, one of him and Eliza from years ago. She didn't know how he got it. "And because I saw her, and I saw me in her eyes." A long silence followed. He added quietly, "Is she mine?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. "Just tell me," he pleaded. "Please." She opened her mouth. But just then, a crash came from the bakery downstairs. A loud one, glass shattering. Richard turned, alert. What was that? Eliza's face went pale. "Oh no, Maisie." They both bolted down the stairs. The door to the bakery had been broken open. Shelves were knocked over. Flowers scattered the floor like snow. And near the back window, there was a spray-painted message in red. "Stay away from him." Richard's eyes blazed. Was this Damien? Eliza stared in horror. She didn't need to guess, because on the floor was the second page of the contract Damien had left. It was torn, and under the torn edge, a single word was scrawled in thick marker. "Yours." Richard picked it up, jaw clenched. Then he turned to her. "I don't care what you say. I'm not leaving, and I'm not letting that man anywhere near you or her." Eliza's lips parted to speak, but then they both heard a sound from upstairs. A soft, frightened voice. "Mommy." They turned and saw Maisie, clutching her stuffed bunny, standing at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, eyes wide with fear. Eliza ran to her and scooped her in her arms. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "Everything's okay." But as Richard stood there, staring up at the girl he now knew in his bones was his daughter, and down at the thread on the bakery wall, he realized nothing was okay, and things were about to get a lot worse. The next morning, the bakery didn't open. The closed sign swung quietly behind the glass. A faint smudge of red spray, paint still clinging to the brick wall beside the door, despite Eliza's desperate scrubbing at dawn. The window had been replaced with a wooden board for now, but no amount of patching could hide the truth. Someone had broken in, and it wasn't random. Upstairs, Maisie sat on the couch in her pajamas, her bunny clutched tight in her arms as she stared at the turned-off TV. Her eyes were quiet, too quiet. Eliza hated that look, that silence, that fear. Richard stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee that Eliza hadn't offered. He hadn't left, not after the break-in, not after the word "yours" stared him in the face like a final verdict. He'd stayed on the couch all night, arms crossed, staring at the ceiling like he was trying to figure out how to turn back time. Eliza walked in, rubbing her temples. "I can handle this," she said. He glanced at her. "That's a lie, and you know it." She met his eyes. What do you want me to say, Richard? That you were right to show up out of nowhere and tear everything open again? I should be grateful you're here now. He looked toward the living room where Maisie sat. I just want the truth, he said softly. Is she mine? A long silence. Then, finally, Eliza's voice broke. Yes. Richard closed his eyes. 1,000 thoughts raced through him. Rage, guilt, fear, hope. She's 6, he whispered. I missed everything. Yes, Eliza said. You did. He sat down, face pale. Why didn't you tell me? She leaned against the counter, her voice trembling. You disappeared. You left. No call. No message. Just gone. I was building the company, he said. They said I had to let go of everything. Us. They said I couldn't be distracted. Eliza's eyes flashed. And you listened. You chose them. I thought I was doing the right thing. She laughed bitterly. Well, now you get to see what the right thing cost. They were both quiet. Then a small voice broke the tension. Mommy, Maisie called from the couch. Who is he? Eliza froze. So did Richard. He stood slowly and walked into the living room. Hi, he said gently. My name is Richard. Maisie looked up at him with wide, cautious eyes. You were in the park. He nodded. Yes, I saw you swinging. Are you my mommy's friend? He paused, swallowing hard. I was a long time ago. Maisie looked at her mother. Is he my daddy? Eliza's lips parted. Her breath caught. Richard knelt beside the couch. Can I sit with you? He asked. Maisie hesitated, then nodded. He sat beside her slowly, like she was a wild animal that might run. Her bunny squished between them. I don't know what your mommy told you, he said softly, but I didn't know about you. Not until yesterday. Maisie blinked. You didn't know I was real? He smiled sadly. No, but now I do, and I'm really glad I found you. She studied him for a long moment. Then, without a word, she handed him her bunny. He almost cried. Eliza watched from the doorway, arms crossed, heart twisted in knots. She couldn't deny it anymore. Maisie had a right to know her father. But that didn't mean Richard had earned his place. Not yet, and especially not with Damien circling like a vulture. That afternoon, Richard made a call. Connor answered on the first ring. Yes, sir. I want full surveillance on Damien Carr. I want to know what he's planning. And I want security on Eliza's building. Quietly. You think he'll come back? I know he will. And if he does... Richard's voice turned ice cold. Then we'll make sure he regrets it. 2 days passed without incident. Richard stayed nearby, checking in on the bakery, walking Maisie to daycare with Eliza, even helping clean up broken glass and repaint the walls. It was awkward, tense, but little by little, Maisie warmed up to him. She liked his stories, especially the one about the time he accidentally wore mismatched shoes to a board meeting. She laughed so hard she snorted juice through her nose. He'd never heard a better sound. Eliza watched him carefully. She didn't trust him, not fully, but she couldn't ignore what she saw, the way Maisie lit up around him, the way he looked at their daughter like he'd been lost in the dark and she was the sun. Still, the storm hadn't passed, and late one evening, the phone rang. Eliza answered. Hello. Still ignoring my offer? Came Damien's voice on the line. She stiffened. You broke into my business. That's not an offer. It's a threat. I just wanted your attention. Well, you got it. Now, leave us alone. Oh, Eliza, he said with a mocking sigh. You don't get to dismiss me. Not when I know your little secret. Her heart froze. I know who Maisie's father is, he continued. And I know what that's worth. You stay away from her, she growled. I could sell that information, you know, to the press, the board, maybe even a few of Richard's competitors. They'd love to know he's got an unclaimed heir hiding in the bakery district. She gritted her teeth. You wouldn't dare, but I would, unless you meet me. Tonight, 9 p.m. corner of DeLance and 34th. Bring the deed to the bakery. You're insane. Tick-tock, he whispered. You have 2 choices, the building or your daughter's safety. The line went dead. Eliza stood frozen. She didn't want to believe him. But Damien didn't make empty threats. She had no choice. At 9 p.m. sharp, Eliza arrived at the corner of DeLance and 34th. She wore a dark coat and clutched a manila envelope under her arm. No sign of Damien yet. She waited. And then he appeared, leaning against a street lamp. smiling like he'd just won a prize. "I knew you'd come," he said. "I'm only here to make sure you don't go near my daughter again." "Funny, I thought you were here to hand over the bakery." He reached for the envelope, but before she could give it to him, a black SUV screeched to a stop behind them. The door burst open, and Richard stepped out. "Get away from her," he growled. Damien's smile vanished. Well, the hero arrives. "I know everything," Richard said. "The threats, the break-in, the fake contracts. And what are you going to do about it?" Richard took a step closer. "I bought out your debt last year. I own you now, Damien. One word from me, and you'll be back behind bars before sunrise." Damien's smirk faltered. "You're bluffing." "Try me." For a tense second, no one moved. Then Damien's eyes darkened. "This isn't over." He turned and disappeared into the shadows. Richard turned to Eliza, chest heaving. "I told you I wouldn't let him near you again." But Eliza didn't answer. She was staring down the alley, her face pale. Richard followed her gaze. And there, hidden behind a dumpster, was a tiny, wide-eyed figure holding a pink bunny and shivering in the dark. "Maisie," Eliza whispered. The girl stepped out slowly. "I followed you, Mommy," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought you were in trouble." Eliza rushed forward and scooped her into her arms. "You weren't supposed to leave the apartment." Maisie clung to her neck. "I was scared." Richard stared at them both, his heart breaking. And then, just as he opened his mouth to speak, a camera flash exploded from across the street. Click! A man with a long lens ducked into a black van and sped away. Richard's blood went cold. "That was a paparazzi," he said. Eliza's eyes widened in horror. "He got a photo of all three of us." And just like that, their secret was no longer a secret. The next morning, it was everywhere. Headlines screamed across glossy tabloids and digital news sites. Billionaire CEO Richard Delancey seen with mystery woman and child. Secret love child? Bakery owner tied to billionaire scandal. Is this the daughter of one of America's most powerful men? Photos of Richard standing beside Eliza and Maisie in the alley lit up screens in cafes, offices, and boardrooms across the city. The image was grainy, but unmistakable. Maisie's bunny, Eliza's shocked face, Richard reaching toward them. The internet exploded. In Richard's penthouse, Connor burst in holding a tablet. "Sir, it's bad. Every outlet's running with it. We've already had 5 investors call, demanding a statement." Richard rubbed his temples. "What did the board say?" "They want a meeting. Today." Richard stood and walked to the window. Below, reporters were already gathering at the tower entrance. He could feel the ground shaking beneath him. The empire he built, now teetering on a single moment. "Get the car," he said. "I'm going to see her." Connor hesitated. "Is that wise? Being seen together again right now." "I don't care." Meanwhile, at the bakery, chaos reigned. Reporters hovered outside like hungry birds, snapping photos through the windows, calling out Eliza's name. "Miss Eliza, how long have you known Richard Delancey? Is Maisie his child? Why did you keep it secret? Are you in a relationship?" Eliza locked the door and pulled the curtains. Maisie sat on the couch with her ears covered, terrified. Her phone rang nonstop. Unknown numbers. Media requests. Tabloid offers. Eliza unplugged it. She paced the kitchen like a caged lion. Her hands trembled as she tried to make toast, but the bread dropped onto the floor. "I've ruined everything," she whispered. Maisie peeked into the kitchen. "Mommy? Are they going to take me away?" Eliza dropped to her knees. "No, baby. Never. No one's taking you away." Maisie nodded, tears filling her eyes. They were shouting outside. They said your name and his name, and... Eliza wrapped her in a hug and rocked her back and forth. "Sure, it's okay. I got you." There was a knock at the back door. She tensed. Another knock. 3 short taps. 1 long. She recognized it. She pulled open the door. Richard stood there, breathless, disheveled. "We need to talk," he said. Eliza let him in. They sat at the tiny table, while Maisie curled up on the couch again with her bunny, eyes flicking nervously between them. "They found us," Eliza said. "There's no going back now." "I'll fix it," Richard said. "Ow," she snapped. "You can't untake a photo. You can't erase the internet. You can't erase him from her face." "I'm not trying to erase anything." he said quietly. I'm trying to protect her. And you? Eliza's voice cracked. She's never been in danger before. Not until you came back. Richard didn't flinch. Then let me make it right. She shook her head. You can't. A silence stretched between them. Then Richard spoke again, carefully. The board is panicking. If they think I've been hiding a child, they'll see it as a liability. A distraction. I could lose control of the company. Eliza frowned. So what are you saying? That Maisie is a problem now. He slammed his palm on the table. No, I'm saying they'll think that. Not me. I don't care about the company anymore if it means losing her again. His eyes locked with hers. I want to be in her life. I want to know her. I want her to know me. Whatever it takes. Eliza looked at him for a long time. There was pain in his voice. Real pain. And fear. And something else. Love. Then he added, and I'm not leaving her unprotected. I've already hired full-time security. 2 men are outside. No one gets near unless you want them to. Eliza didn't say anything. Then Maisie's voice broke the silence. Mr. Richard? He turned to her. Yes, sweetheart. She stood up slowly, bunny in hand. Are you going to be my daddy now? Eliza's breath caught. Richard knelt again and looked Maisie in the eyes. I want to be, he said gently. If your mommy says it's okay. And if you want that. Maisie was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded, and Richard hugged her. Tears slipped down Eliza's face. For the first time, it felt like maybe this could work. Until the knock came. This time, it wasn't the back door. It was the front. 3 loud bangs. A voice shouting, Open up. Legal delivery for Ms. Eliza Wren. Eliza opened the door an inch, enough to take the envelope. The man walked off without another word. She opened it at the table. Richard read over her shoulder, and both of them went pale. It was a court summons, filed by Damien Carr. He was suing Eliza for defamation, breach of contract, and damages, claiming that she had ruined his business reputation, sabotaged a financial agreement, and now owed him $3.2 million. At the bottom, scrawled in blue ink, were 5 words. See you in court, sweetheart. Eliza dropped the letter. Richard caught her arm as she nearly fell back into the chair. He's serious, she whispered. He's really going through with this. Richard was already pulling out his phone. No, he's not, he said. Not if I beat him to it. But before he could call his lawyer, another sound came. The buzz of an incoming video notification. It was Eliza's email. A video had been sent. No message, just a file. They opened it. The footage was grainy but clear. It showed a camera, hidden, probably mounted on a building across the street, zooming in through the bakery window. Inside the bakery, Eliza could be seen standing at the register. A few seconds later, Maisie appeared, laughing and spinning with her arms wide. Then, Damien stepped into frame. The date on the video was 4 months ago. He was inside the bakery. He placed something on the counter. He bent down, said something to Maisie, and reached out his hand to touch her cheek. Then the video cut to black. Richard stared at the screen. Why the hell does he have this? Eliza's voice cracked. He's been watching us. And just then, a new message appeared under the video. You should have taken the deal. Richard looked up at Eliza, his face hard as steel. I'm not just going to protect you anymore, he said. I'm going to destroy him. But as he stood and dialed his lawyer, he didn't notice Eliza swaying slightly. Her lips were pale. Her breath came shallow. Then, her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed. Eliza, Richard shouted, catching her just before she hit the floor. Maisie screamed. The screen of the phone lit up with Damien's name again, as if he knew. And outside the window, a black car idled, watching, waiting. Richard lifted Eliza into his arms, her body limp and cold against his chest. Panic surged through him like wildfire. Eliza, stay with me. Come on, he shouted, shaking her gently. Her head lolled, her eyes fluttered shut, and her lips had lost all color. Maisie cried from behind the couch, hugging her bunny so tight it looked like its seams might burst. Connor! Richard barked into his phone as he rushed to the apartment door, cradling Eliza. Get the car. Now. She's collapsed. We need a hospital, fast. Maisie ran after them in her slippers. Is Mommy dying? Richard turned briefly, eyes filled with fear and determination. No, sweetheart. I promise. I won't let anything happen to her. The car screeched up just as Richard burst out of the back door, security already moving toward them. She fainted, he told the guard. Get Maisie in the car. Don't let anyone follow us. Especially not that bastard Damien. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens, honking, Maisie sobs, and Richard pressing a damp cloth to Eliza's forehead while whispering, "Come on, Eliza, don't leave me again." In the emergency room, the doctors moved quickly. They ran tests, hooked up monitors, and wheeled Eliza away while Richard and Maisie sat in the waiting area. The little girl curled up on his lap. Her small fingers clung to his shirt. "Is she going to be okay?" she asked softly. Richard kissed the top of her head. "She's strong. Like you." A nurse approached. "Mr. Delancey? You can see her now." They entered the private room. Eliza lay still, a heart monitor beeping beside her. A soft oxygen tube looped over her ears. Her skin looked too pale under the harsh lights. Richard took her hand and squeezed it. Her eyes fluttered open. "You're still here?" she whispered. "I told you," he said. "I'm not leaving." A weak smile tugged at her lips. "You must be really stubborn." The doctor entered. "Miss Wren, you fainted due to exhaustion and stress. Your blood pressure was dangerously low. I strongly recommend rest, hydration, and no emotional shocks for a while." She nodded slowly. The doctor hesitated, then added, "There's something else." Richard tensed. "What is it?" The doctor looked between them and lowered his voice. "You're dehydrated, underweight for your height, and your cortisol levels are off the charts. If this continues, you could face heart complications. Miss Wren, you need to take care of yourself, especially since you're raising a child." Eliza's fingers twitched in Richard's grip. "I don't have time for rest," she said. "There's a lawsuit. There's Maisie. There's the bakery. There's me." Richard interrupted. "Let me help." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Maisie climbed into the hospital bed and curled up beside her mom. That night, Richard made a decision. No more half measures. No more hiding. If Damien wanted war, he was going to get it. The next morning, Richard sat in his office at Delancey Holdings, staring down the boardroom like a general before battle. Around the long table sat 12 powerful men and women, all rich, cold, and skeptical. They'd seen the headlines. They'd read the gossip. And now they wanted answers. "Mr. Delancey," said the chairman, Mr. Holloway, adjusting his glasses, "we'd like to confirm something before we proceed. Is it true you have a child no one knew about?" Richard stood. "Yes." Murmurs. "And the mother?" "I loved her," Richard said clearly. "I still do. I made a mistake years ago. I left her behind. But I'm fixing that now." The room went quiet. "I understand your concerns," Richard continued. "You think this is a scandal, a liability, a distraction. But let me be very clear. My daughter is not a mistake. She's the only thing that matters to me more than this company." He leaned in. "So, if anyone in this room has a problem with that, speak now or consider your seat vacant." Silence. Then Holloway cleared his throat. "We're not questioning your loyalty, Richard, but the press is circling. Investors are nervous. And this lawsuit, this Damien Carr, if he drags this family drama into court." "He won't," Richard said, "because I'm going to file first." Everyone blinked. "You're suing him?" someone asked. "I'm not just suing him," Richard replied. "I'm burying him. I've got proof of illegal surveillance, extortion, harassment, and endangerment of a minor. I'll drag him into federal court if I have to." He turned to Connor, who stood ready with a thick binder. "Distribute these. It's everything on Carr. Full background. Witnesses. Evidence. I want the legal team mobilized within the hour." The room shifted. Some nodded. Some looked impressed. And slowly, the tide turned. Back at the apartment, Eliza sat up in bed with Maisie asleep at her side, her small hands still curled around her bunny's paw. The bakery was still closed, and the reporters had finally been chased off by Richard's security team. But Eliza's heart was anything but calm. She scrolled through her inbox. Another anonymous email. Subject line, "Does Richard know?" She opened it. Inside was a single photo. It was of her, but not recent. Not with Maisie. This was from 7 years ago. In the photo, she was crying in a parking garage just after she discovered she was pregnant. She recognized the place. She remembered that day. No one had been there. No one had seen her. But someone had taken that photo, and now they were threatening to use it. Her fingers trembled. The email didn't say anything else, but she knew who it was from. Damien had eyes everywhere. Just then, Richard stepped into the room, a tired but triumphant look on his face. "I filed a suit," he said. "By morning, his lawyers will be calling me." Eliza looked up, swallowing her fear. "I just got another message," she said. "He's not giving up." Richard sat beside her, placing a protective hand on her back. "Then he hasn't figured it out yet." "Figure what out?" Richard looked her in the eyes. "That he already lost." But outside the apartment, a man in a black hoodie stood across the street, a camera slung around his neck and a phone to his ear. He watched the light in Eliza's window flicker. Then he whispered into the phone, "She's alone with the kid all day tomorrow. Wanting to move in?" A pause. Then a voice on the other end said, "Do it. Take her." The man nodded. And the next morning, while Eliza stepped downstairs to sign for a delivery, leaving Maisie inside alone for just 3 minutes, the door creaked open, and a hand reached silently through the gap. Maisie turned, and the bunny dropped to the floor. The bunny hit the floor with a soft thud. Maisie stood frozen, her tiny body stiff as the door swung open. A man stepped inside, quiet as a shadow. He wore a gray cap pulled low over his face and sunglasses, though the sun hadn't yet risen. She took a step back. "You're not Mommy's friend," she whispered. He didn't answer, just smiled, and reached into his coat. Maisie turned and ran. She sprinted down the hall toward the bedroom, heart pounding so loud she thought it might explode. She ducked under the bed, her special hiding place, and held her breath. The man followed, calm and slow, like he had all the time in the world. Outside, Eliza signed the delivery form and turned to re-enter the building. She had a bad feeling, like ice had poured in her chest. She dropped the pen. She didn't even pick it up. She ran. Inside the apartment, the man stood in the bedroom doorway, scanning the room. He saw a small foot peeking out from beneath the bed skirt. He smiled again, but before he could reach down, "Get away from her." Eliza tackled him from behind with a scream that could tear through steel. They crashed to the floor. The man snarled, throwing her off, but Eliza scrambled back to her feet, grabbing the closest thing she could, a glass lamp. She smashed it over his head. He staggered. Maisie screamed from under the bed. "Eliza!" Richard's voice bellowed from the front door, thundering across the apartment. He burst into the room just as the man lunged at Eliza again. Richard didn't hesitate. He tackled him hard, fists flying. The man groaned as Richard slammed him against the wall, pinning him. Security stormed in seconds later, yanking the intruder to the ground and cuffing him with zip ties. Maisie crawled out from under the bed sobbing. Eliza snatched her into her arms. I'm here. You're okay, baby," she whispered through trembling lips, rocking her daughter against her chest as Maisie wept into her shirt. The man spat on the floor. "You can't stop it. Damien's already made the call. This is just the beginning." Richard's fist clenched. "Who sent you?" The man smirked. "Ask your girlfriend." Security dragged him out, but those last words hung in the air like a fog. Richard turned to Eliza, who was still cradling Maisie on the floor. He knelt beside them. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. Richard wrapped both of them in his arms. "I'm not leaving you alone again. Not even for a second." An hour later, the police took statements. The intruder had no ID on him, no phone. Clean gloves, no fingerprints. But Richard had already hired a private investigator to dig deeper. Connor arrived at the apartment breathless. "We traced the burner phone from the email Eliza got yesterday." Richard's eyes narrowed, and Connor hesitated. "It's worse than we thought. It was purchased by a shell company, owned by Karen Holdings." Richard froze. Karen Holdings was one of the shadow corporations Damien used to launder his real estate deals years ago. The company had been dormant since 2019, but now it was back, and it was watching them. "Damien's not just trying to scare you," Connor said. "He's setting something up. Something big." Richard stood, jaw clenched. "Then let's blow up his whole house of cards." That night, the three of them stayed in a private suite at a luxury hotel, guarded by a full team of Richard's security staff. The windows were reinforced, the cameras motion triggered, the floors restricted. Maisie curled up between them in bed, her bunny tucked under her chin. She was finally sleeping again, but Eliza wasn't. Neither was Richard. They sat on the edge of the bed in silence, both staring at the floor, the TV quietly humming in the background with muted news chatter. She almost got taken, Eliza whispered, voice hollow. He almost had her. Richard reached for her hand. But he didn't. We got there in time. What if next time we don't? There won't be a next time. Eliza turned to look at him. Her eyes were filled with tears, but also something else. Rage. I want to fight back, she said. I want him to pay for everything. For the fear. For the threats. For trying to take my daughter. Richard nodded. Good. He stood and walked to his laptop on the desk. I've been building something, he said. A legal nuke. I just needed the match. He turned the screen toward her. It showed a chain of financial documents, emails, transaction trails, all tied to Damien, all implicating him in fraud, bribery, and now, child endangerment. Where did you get this? She asked. I've had investigators following him for weeks. But after today, they dug deeper, and they found everything. Even the money he paid the man who broke in today. Her eyes widened. We can really take him down. We can destroy him, Richard said. Legally. Publicly. Forever. But what about your board? She asked. If they think this is a scandal. I don't care, he said. If they want to throw me out, they can try. But they'll be throwing out the man who just saved a 6-year-old girl from being kidnapped and exposed one of the city's biggest fraud rings in the process. He took her hands. Eliza, I love you. I never stopped. I made a terrible mistake before, but I want to fix it. She looked at him, silent. I want to be there. For you. For Maisie. Every single day. She stared at him for a long time. Then she whispered, okay. Richard smiled. She leaned into him. They sat together, holding each other, as their daughter slept between them. Safe. For now. The next morning, Richard arrived at a press conference. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted his name. He stood at the podium in a dark suit and tie, Connor by his side. I know there have been rumors, he began. I know some of you have questions, so let me answer them clearly. He paused, then said, yes, I have a daughter, and she is the best thing that has ever happened to me. More flashes. She and her mother were targeted by a dangerous man named Damien Carr. That man will face the full consequences of his actions. Then he held up a folder. In this file is proof of fraud, intimidation, attempted kidnapping, and financial crimes committed by Mr. Carr and his shell companies. All of it has been turned over to federal authorities. Chaos erupted in the room, but Richard raised his hand and silenced it. And finally, he said, for those asking whether I will be stepping down as CEO, no. I'm more committed to this company than ever, and I will not be bullied by criminals hiding behind cameras. Thunderous applause. Some reporters were stunned. Others applauded, but none dared shout again. After the press conference, Richard stepped outside into the sunlight, flanked by security. Connor clapped him on the back. Sir, that was bold. Had to be, Richard said. Damien's got nothing left to hide behind now. But just then, Richard's phone buzzed. A blocked number. He hesitated, then answered. The voice on the other end was hoarse and low. You think this is over? Damien rasped. Richard froze. You're going to pay for humiliating me. You all are. Richard's voice dropped to ice. I've already destroyed your empire. You have nothing. But Damien only chuckled. You've taken everything from me, Delancey. So now I'm going to take everything from you. Click. The line went dead. Richard lowered the phone slowly. And for the first time since this began, he felt afraid. Because Damien had nothing left to lose. The silence in Richard's car felt heavier than steel. Connor sat beside him, checking Damien's last known cell tower pings. We lost his signal after that call, he muttered. No new location. No activity on his accounts. It's like he vanished. Richard stared out the window, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. You don't threaten a man's child and disappear just to sulk in the woods, he said. He's planning something. I know it. Back at the hotel, Eliza was pacing again. Maisie sat safely in the corner of the suite with two of Richard's most trusted guards stationed outside the door. But her wide, alert eyes didn't leave her mother. Mommy, Is the bad man coming back? Eliza kneeled and wrapped her arms around her. No, baby, he's not. We're safe. But the way she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. Not after the message. Not after the attempted abduction. And not after Richard's call. He had called her moments after hanging up with Damien, and all he said was, he's going to come at us sideways. He's not done. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He sat at the desk in the hotel room, files spread across the table like puzzle pieces. Every move Damien had made in the past 6 months, every shell company, every bribe, every threat, it all pointed to something bigger. Not desperation. Preparation. The question was, for what? At 2:17 a.m., Connor called. Boss, you need to see this. Richard rushed to the security command room, an entire floor he'd rented and equipped like a CIA bunker. Connor pointed to the screens. On camera feed number 14, there it was. A shadowy figure in a black hoodie had approached the hotel power generator 2 hours earlier. He wasn't carrying a weapon. He was carrying a small box. Plastic. Wired. A jammer. The screen went dark for 5 seconds. When the feed came back, the man was gone. What was that? Richard barked. A blackout test, Connor replied grimly. He killed our security grid for 5 seconds. Just 5. That's all he needed. To test if he could get in. Richard's face darkened. He grabbed the walkie and ordered a full lockdown. More guards. Reinforcements. No one in or out without full ID. But inside, he knew. Damien had already played his hand. He was just waiting for them to let their guard down. 2 days later, the news hit again. Not in the tabloids this time. On a legitimate business news network. Breaking. Delancey Holdings under investigation for securities fraud and asset manipulation. Anonymous tip sent to federal regulators accuses CEO Richard Delancey of hiding illegal offshore accounts and using company funds for personal legal battles. Richard stared at the screen, stunned. No. This isn't possible. Connor rushed in. We didn't leak anything. This is manufactured. The documents are forged. But they look real. Richard's phone rang again. This time it was his CFO. Richard, the man whispered urgently. The board is calling an emergency vote. They're considering removing you as CEO. He couldn't breathe. He'd seen this tactic before. Damien wasn't trying to attack him physically. He was attacking his life. Piece by piece. Publicly. And if he couldn't take Richard's daughter, he'd take everything else. Richard stood and stormed out of the room. In the hotel suite, Eliza was packing. She couldn't take it anymore. The stress. The headlines. The cameras outside every building. The fake news. The real threats. She had to protect Maisie, even if it meant running. Maisie watched quietly, holding her bunny. Mommy, she said, are we leaving Mr. Richard? Eliza froze. She crouched down. No, baby, but we might need to stay somewhere else for a little while. Maisie frowned. But I like him. He makes funny voices when he reads books. Eliza hugged her tight, but her stomach twisted. She loved him too, but she couldn't keep Maisie safe here. Not if things kept getting worse. Just as she zipped the bag, the door burst open. Richard stood there, chest heaving, eyes frantic. You can't leave. Eliza turned sharply. I don't have a choice. You tried to take my daughter, Richard. You think I'm just going to sit around and wait for the next attack? I know, Richard said, stepping closer. But that's exactly what he wants. He wants us scattered. Alone. Scared. He pulled out a folder. This was just sent to the SEC, he said. Anonymous documents claiming I laundered money for you. From Maisie, that I funded the bakery with stolen capital. He's not after me. He's after us. Her face paled. That's not true. None of that's true. I know, but if we split up now, he wins. He takes everything. My company, my reputation, your life, Maisie's future. He grabbed her hand. I have a plan. She looked into his eyes. They weren't just pleading. They were burning. What kind of plan? We flip the game on him. We bait him. And when he comes, we end it. Legally. Publicly. For good. She swallowed. Bait him how? Richard opened his laptop and showed her an email he'd just drafted. Subject, final offer, let's meet. Body, you want to ruin me? Let's do it face to face. One deal, one night, one room. Bring whatever you've got. I'm not afraid anymore. He looked up. We let him think he's won. He'll show. And when he does, we'll be ready. Eliza hesitated. Where? Richard tapped the map. The old Delancey estate. A private mansion on the city's edge. Empty, quiet, with dozens of hidden cameras and one exit. She looked at the blueprint, then back at him. Then she said the words that sealed it. Let's finish this. 2 nights later, a black car pulled into the long gravel driveway of the Delancey estate. The house loomed like a silent fortress. Inside, Eliza waited on the second floor. Richard stood in the center of the great hall, alone. The cameras were rolling. The security team waited quietly in hidden rooms, ready. The front door creaked open. Damien entered, alone, smiling. You really did it, he said, clapping slowly. You gave me the perfect finale. Richard didn't flinch. This ends tonight. Damien's smile faded. It does, he said coldly, but not the way you think. He stepped forward. I've sent all the files. The media has it. The SEC. The board. Your empire is burning, Richard. And yet, Richard said, here you are. Exposed. Recorded. Caught. He nodded toward the blinking red dot on the wall. Damien turned and froze. All around him, tiny red lights blinked from the walls, ceilings, paintings. His eyes widened. No, he hissed. No, you wouldn't. Oh, I did, Richard said. The front door slammed shut. Security locked in, and Damien's rage exploded. He lunged, but Richard was ready. They crashed into the floor. Fists, shouts, splintering wood. Eliza watched from above as security rushed in, pulled Damien off Richard, and pinned him. But just before they dragged him away, Damien locked eyes with Richard and smiled. That girl, she's not the only one I watched, he hissed. You never checked the school, did you? Richard's blood ran cold. What did you do? Damien's grin widened. You're already too late. And in that instant, Richard's phone buzzed. Unknown number. One word in the text. Boom. A deafening explosion lit up the night sky. And Richard turned, screaming, Maisie. The sky outside the Delancey estate turned orange. The explosion rocked the ground, shattered windows, shrieking alarms. Security scrambled. Fire bloomed in the distance like a dying sun. Richard didn't wait. He ran. Connor, track that blast, he shouted into his earpiece. Was it the hotel? Tell me it wasn't the hotel. Connor's voice came back, breathless. No, not the hotel. It was a car near the school. One of her decoys. No casualties. Maisie's safe. I repeat, she's safe. Richard dropped to his knees, a raw breath of relief tearing from his lungs. His heart, pounding like a war drum, began to slow. He looked up. Damien was being shoved into the back of a police cruiser, wrists cuffed behind his back, blood trickling down his chin. But even then, even defeated, he laughed. You think this ends with me? He snarled. You exposed me, fine, but this world's built for people like me. You can't protect her forever. Richard stepped forward, gaze like steel. Watch me. Then the door slammed shut. Damien Carr, the man who tried to ruin them, destroy them, take their child, was gone. And this time, he wasn't coming back. 3 months later, it was warm. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla drifted out of the bakery windows. The new sign above the door, painted by Maisie herself, read Maisie's Corner in bright pink and gold letters. A crowd gathered inside for the soft reopening. The media had lost interest, the security had eased off, and for the first time in nearly a year, the Wren family felt normal. Maisie stood behind the counter wearing a tiny apron and chef's hat that kept slipping over her eyes. Next customer, please, she squeaked. Richard stepped up to the counter with a wide grin. Hi there. I heard this place has the best muffins in town. Maisie squinted up at him. Only if you say the secret password. He leaned in close and whispered, Is it poppy seed unicorn sparkle? She burst into giggles. Close enough. Behind them, Eliza watched with a smile that stretched all the way to her soul. She stepped out from behind the ovens, wiping her hands on her apron. Her hair was tied back, and a small tattoo now graced the inside of her wrist. A tiny bunny holding a heart. Richard reached for her hand, gently kissing it. Are you ready? She looked around the shop. Her shop. Their daughter laughing. Peace at last. I've been ready, she said. Later that evening, the three of them sat on the rooftop of the bakery under a sky full of stars. They ate dinner on a checkered blanket, warm bread and strawberries, and lemonade in mason jars. Maisie yawned and leaned into Eliza's side. Mommy, yes, baby. She looked up at both of them. Are we going to be together forever now? Eliza smiled. Forever and ever. Richard pulled them both close. And nothing's ever going to take you away from us again. Maisie smiled sleepily. Okay, because I don't want another daddy. Eliza and Richard exchanged a glance, full of love, of gratitude, of scars healed, and tucked her in tighter. And just before she drifted to sleep, Maisie mumbled, "Remember when I told you looked sad, mister?" Richard nodded, brushing her hair back. She smiled. "You don't look sad anymore." He kissed her forehead. "I'm not." The stars blinked softly above them. The bakery glowed below. And in the heart of the city, where a love once lost had found its way home, peace finally bloomed.